It was a game, and I suppose I remember the old-fashioned, the fact that it is black and white, and it was, played on a Game Boy. I definitely remember that. But of course, it is completely different now, and the sort of playing it on, smartphones. I certainly didn't know the story. I absolutely didn't know that it was invented by some, by a Russian person. I didn't know the whole connection with Robert Maxwell and Sega and all that. So reading the script, I thought was fascinating. A, for that knowledge, and also it's like a fast thriller. Well, it is a fast thriller, and you just, fascinating. Yeah. There were quite a few images that had been pulled together by researchers for the film, but I definitely went off and researched the characters because they're real, and I never think that you should be doing a looky-likey, but I do think you try and get the essence of somebody, and then it depends on the director, and then it depends on the actor themselves how far they want to go. I mean, in Taron's case, Henk Rogers, I believe he's part Indonesian, so he's got a much darker skin tone and a much darker curly hair, and I had to make that look on Taron be more believable, so everything was pulled back a bit. But I think also the fact that it's set in the 80s, which, there's all big hair in the 80s, that it's we knew we had to push it a little way, but I don't think it would have looked right if we tried to make Taron very dark-skinned, and not necessary, I don't think. I've worked with Mark Coulier so many times, and I love the way he works. I like the collaboration with him. I like the fact that we would talk about the hair and the makeup together, and we would accommodate each other, and we would I would say to him, I think that hair works, and he would say, I think that nose works, or should we go for the second nose? Or, I love that that it's not just two people doing two separate things. And so it made sense for me, to make sure Mark was on board the project. And also John had worked with Mark, so he was 100% up for him coming on board. And it was great, and it was again the same thing. We knew we had to get Roger scanned. We knew there was a fat suit involved. We did tests on that. We tried different size suits on him. Obviously, then you work very closely with Nat, the costume designer, which I would anyway. With all our characters, it's a whole creative design that works when you all come together. I suppose the prosthetic ones are rewarding because you are completely changing somebody. I suppose Gorbachev is also quite interesting because Matthew came to us quite late, so we didn't have the time to do the full makeup that we did on Roger. So that one's quite interesting because it's smaller pieces, and I've always liked that as well. I like the fact that you can change somebody just by doing very small things, like he's got little cheek pieces on and a nose, and then obviously we shave the top of his head and then put on hair round the side. So I suppose that's rewarding because we had to pull it together very quickly. But I do think it is amazing to watch Roger as Maxwell, the voice, everything. The other thing about this film is John was very keen to make sure that if we had Russian characters, that actually they were played by Russian actors. That made it a little bit difficult because obviously availability, getting them in, the COVID, the visas and all that. So we did get our actors quite late. Nikita, who plays Alexei, we had quite a funny WhatsApp thing going on where I had him taking his own head shape for me because I knew I had to get him a wig because I knew his own hair wasn't long enough. So that was quite entertaining as he was showing me pictures on his WhatsApp of how it was going along. So he was brilliant. And in fact, all the Russian actors are amazing. I mean, their English is so good, but they've brought, I think, another element to this film. Baldwin, who's just fantastic, the DOP, he told us quite early on that he had different coloured palettes from the point of view of lighting, and that makes a huge difference to me. And I knew that he was going to desaturate the Russian, so any colours were diffused. I was a bit worried about wig colours and skin tones to begin with, but actually it's fine. I do pump up especially Taran's colour, because he's, we wanted him to have a little bit more of a tanned look. So I do have to do more on him when we're shooting the Russian bit, because it is more diffused. But then, we've got a Las Vegas bit, which is really bright and crisp, and so it is nice to know these things. And it's also quite interesting when you're watching on set, when you look at the properly set up monitors, how it all looks. And in fact, of course, that also affected the prosthetic makeup, which of course I had to pass on to Mark. And we did do a little test of how much colour it did diffuse from their faces.